Cool. Welcome everybody to meeting of the Implementation Committee. I understand, I think this is our last Implementation Committee meeting for the triennium. So welcome everybody. I understand we have Councillor Dika, Councillor Callagher and Councillor Laws on Zoom. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Oh. Do we have any apologies for this meeting? Do we have, is everybody here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10. Cool. No apologies for today's meeting. Thank you. Public forum. My understanding is that strictly speaking, we don't have any public forum, that these are separate presentations that we're awaiting shortly. So no public forum. Confirmation of the agenda. I put out an email yesterday afternoon in relation to the first agenda item where I suggested that the Ministry of Education MOU school bus services report lie on the table, and subsequently to that the CE has withdrawn that report. So on that basis, there's only one item in terms of the council agenda before moving into public excluded. I'm prepared to move that. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hope, I put that motion on the agenda on that basis.
What,
Yeah.
That motion is saying what, Brian?
That motion is saying that the MOE, the Memorandum of Understanding report of school bus services be withdrawn at this point.
I'd like to hear some background to that. Apart from the email that you sent us yesterday, I'm puzzled as to why that should be withdrawn.
Yeah.
The chief executive is appointed.
Okay. No, that's cool. A lot of speaking going on here. So my understanding, Councillor Dika, Michael, is that the CE has withdrawn it, and then on that basis, there is no further explanation required. Because as soon as we open that door to that discussion,
Surely we're entitled to know why he has withdrawn that paper.
okay, well, I can say from my perspective that that it was felt that further discussion was required with the ministry.
That seems very odd to me, but the paper indicated a significant amount of discussion has already taken place. And I wonder whether the CE, the interim CE feels that his line of discussion may be more fruitful or may be able to change ministry policy or something like that.
No, hang on. There's a lot of chatter here, guys.
Scouts of paper we don't have.
No, I don't understand that. I'm chairing this meeting.
Yeah, but point of order.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Councillor Dika, you made various points, but as the point of order is reaffirmed, this is a discussion for another day.
And we're getting no explanation as to why that is.
I've given you an explanation.
With respect, so you haven't.
Okay. Anyway.
The CEO isn't here to do what he should be doing. So
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move, nevertheless, so that there is an issue there of contention. I'm going to move the motion, nevertheless, seconded by Councillor Hope, the confirmation of the agenda. Those for? Aye. Against?
That was confirmation of the agenda minus that paper.
Correct. Yeah. Carried. Thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest in relation to the public agenda items? If not, I'll move on. Welcome, Lloyd. A hurry trip up from down south, and Sam, I'll invite you two to the front on behalf of the Otago Catchment communities. I understand it's a presentation of your annual report and no doubt other relevant matters.
Actually some, but I don't know whether it's
Was he used?
Just while you're getting set up, Sam and I were at the second meeting of the new Tomahawk Catchment group has been established. And it was certainly interesting to observe all the dynamics around establishing a catchment group and just a few core people feeling their way, discussions with landowners and so forth, and just thinking about the future, short-term goals, long-term goals. And I suspect, Sam, that's where the OCC has a key role, is to hold the hand of these groups and assist them to get to the next stage, whether through mentorship or financially or whatever. Is that correct?
Most definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do I refer to you as Mr. Chairman today in this
You
meeting?
can call me Brian
Brian, thanks.
Cole, and avoid what some of the other councillors call me.
Only behind the bench.
Cole, I'm in your hands and Lloyd's hands. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Firstly, thank you for the slot today to come and present to you. This is earlier than our milestones, but we had all of the information, so we thought it would be a great time to come and speak to the council. I do have Lloyd McCall on my side, who's on our governance committee as the catchment group representative, and as you all will know, Brian is also on our governance committee as the ORC councillor rep. Firstly, thank you for the council's support financially and in person. So with a 3-year multifaceted funding contract from ORC, that really gives us a really good look into the future of what we have available and what we can do for catchment groups across Otago.
Can everybody hear Sam? Is that all right? Is it just me? You might have to speak a little bit louder, Sam.
And we also, with that, thanks to ORC, there's also that mention to MPI as well, with that co-funding model that we have. And in 3 years' time, which we have secured through annual plan process with council, we don't have MPI funding, so we'll still be pushing to get more funding in our 3rd year. This presentation is mainly reflecting on the 21-22 financial year with a snippet of planned expenditure for the next 3 years around our funding for catchment groups. So with our highlights, apologies, there's a couple of things I've added in since I've entered on. So one thing that I'd like to talk about in our highlights is we've started our calendar of events for Otago. That's on our website. It's not the most easy thing to develop when you're trying to work with multiple agencies, multiple volunteer groups, and that's still in process. So if you want to keep up with events, please like us on Facebook and check out what we share on there, and then go on to the actual event, and then you'll have more up-to-date understanding of is it's postponed or cancelled or COVID's happened or things like that.
And that's a work in progress.
It's still a work in progress, and it will be probably for a few more months, maybe 12. We have also contracted Camille McAtimony, who was our treasurer and secretary on the committee. She stepped down from the committee and is now our admin contractor for 10 to 20 hours a week, which has been absolutely fabulous in the background to get us coordinators more time with the groups, myself and Anna. And so the highlights from the 2021-22 year was our regional forums. We had 2 planned and 1 executed through COVID having to cancel the other one. In Omakau, we had 33 people with 11 groups represented, which was really cool. A propagation of propagation workshops, so that's propagating native plants. And the theory behind this workshop was to get more leaders of catchment groups along to learn how to run these workshops, to take that propagation workshop back to their catchment group. So we have more experts within the different catchments instead of having to hone in on a contractor each time. So we had 12 people there and 7 groups were represented. We've gone in partnership with New Zealand Land Care Trust and Catchments Otago to do a research specific grant drive. So we had over a couple of months, it was about 7 or 8 meetings with different groups, whether on Zoom or in person, and 15 groups were represented with about 30 people. And so that that build up a summary of what groups are looking at in the science space, what they need help with, and then has given Catchment Otago the opportunity to line that up with the students that are doing PhDs or masters or actual specific researchers that are looking to do multi-million-dollar fund applications. So far, we haven't had one successful, but there's still application rounds over the next 12 months are available for Catchment Otago to apply to. We had our Otago Catchment Group Leaders Forum, and that was 2 weeks ago on Friday. It was really good to see Councillor Alexa and Councillor Kate there, and a couple of apologies. We had 14 groups represented with 40 people. We had a guest speaker who came up from the Southland, David Dipros, who's on the Porokino Catchment Group and the Epirima Community Environment Trust, and is on Environment Southland's regional forum and has been doing quite a lot of study into how to co-govern catchment groups with iwi. So that was really good for Otago's catchment groups to get a different perspective, get a refreshed vibe, and see what was going on outside of the Otago province. In this year, we were successful with our MPI application to create a co-funding model for OCC, and that was 145,000 for last year, 200,000 for this year, and 200,000 for next year. As part of our MPI contract, we work with a company called Scarletti, who do the monitoring and evaluation of MPI's funding. With that, we do a little bit of work for them by giving them some numbers, but they actually help us with our reporting. So our reporting that we've handed over to ORC has been polished up by Scarletti on behalf of MPI's funding. So they do quite a lot of background work trying to set up our feedback forms and our reporting so that we can get things a lot more succinct to give back over to council. Along with that is the workshops that Anna and I have facilitated. So as a quick overview, we've had a vision confirmation from Lindis Catchment Group, an action plan from Lindis Catchment Group, action planning for East Otago Catchment Group, vision and goals setting for Te Aki Maniatoto, who are a project out of the Upper Tairiwai Catchment Group, and vision and goals for Mid Tairiwai, who started this year, who Kate is actually part of. Vision, values, targets, threats, comms plan, action plan, health attributes for Te Nukuroa o Matamata. So that is the Otago iwi Hapu's project at the Waihola Waipori wetlands. And that was a 3-day workshop that I co-facilitated with their project manager, Kat Nickel. And that actually took quite a lot of the learnings of facilitation that we have for our groups and took it to a space that can set up projects a lot quicker. So we can actually help groups now that receive large funds to take that facilitation method from healthy country planning, which is an Australian set up, very similar to beef and lambs in New Zealand, but it takes that to the next level so that people can set up their projects in the space of 3 or 4 days and in conjunction with the iwi if they are available. So we also did the values for Pulburn Creek Catchment Group, and just a little disclaimer, this is now called Ida Valley Catchment Group. Ida Valley and Pulburn combined in about September, and did a strategy review for NOSLAM's committee. So as part of our project data, we have the number of catchment group members. I move that move on the screen. No, sorry, some of them are hidden by people's faces. So we have 12 Otago catchment community members, and of that, that represents 23 groups. Some groups have pod groups or subgroups that are affiliated. We have 1 new member for the last financial year. However, we have 8 new umbrella organisations or 8 new umbrella groups represented amongst our original members of, well, previous members from the previous year. And that does make up a group membership of 1,574 across Otago of their members.
Sam, can I butt in there for a moment and ask you about the East Otago catchment group? Which catchments does that include? Is that the Waikouiti plus other catchments?
So the Waikouiti, the Shag, and Modaki's in Nosland,
Shag.
and Pleasant River, sorry.
Ah, yes. Thank you, Sam.
So the group meetings table, this is also OCC group support. So there is 22 groups across Otago. We have had, to our knowledge, 221 meetings amongst those groups across Otago. OCC has supported 96 of these meetings, and our total financial support has been 48,900. So on that is the support that has come out of our funding from our seed and small project funds, and our direct group fund is not calculated in this total financial support because that was approved last financial year and will be expended this financial year. So as a spread of our funding across the province, please note the red dots are, because that's not very easy to see, is it? The red dots are direct group funds and the blue dots are seed and small project funds that have been approved across the province. So as our little forecast with our funding that we have, to our knowledge, for the next 3 years, we're looking to increase our funding. So for this year, we have $90,000 available in our seed and small project fund, and 160,000 available in our direct group fund, noting that 62,000 of that was approved last year and will be coming out of that 160. So we have 98 available in our November round of funding. Next year, we're looking to increase our seed and small project fund to 120,000 and our direct group fund to 170,000, and flowing into the 24-25 year, depending on our funding that we may or may not receive from MPI. Our seed and small project fund may shrink, but our direct group fund will either stay the same as the previous year or increase to 190,000. So I'd like to thank you for your time and open up the floor for any questions, but I would also like to remind you to like us on Facebook, share our Facebook, have a look at our website, have a look at the stories on our website, and sign up to our newsletter that's coming out quarterly now.
Cool. Thank you, Sam. Questions, Andrew?
Thanks very much for both of you being here today. Sam, if I look, I'm just gone on, I'm not a Facebook person, but I've just gone on to your website and looked at your activities, care group or whatever gathering you had there. So good stuff, looks like a lot going on. If we looked at a map of Otago, and you highlighted before where the connections are with OCC, with the various groups, and if you looked at the area that those groups are focused on, the balance of the land would make up 50% of Otago. So in other words, it's 50% focused on by some sort of environmental group on the ground. Well, if you've got any idea of the rough split, obviously the focus is the priority areas stage, but just wondered whether you had any idea what that sort of split was.
So the focus on environmental versus...
No, so the split, I'm only talking area.
Oh, area.
So if you took, I don't know, the Wanaka Catchment Group, the area, you know, and all the other catchment groups and all the other environmental groups focused on projects within the region of Otago, would that cover 50% of the area in Otago, 40%, 60%?
We're working on pulling together a map with New Zealand Land Care Trust, just because we don't have ArcGIS capability, but with the members of the catchment groups being 1,500 and the total farms of Otago being 3,620, I would say we're just under 50%.
Okay.
Noting that my math does probably not add up to full percentage.
An estimation is fine.
So that was a good answer, Sam.
Yeah.
That was a good answer.
I think what you'll find that we got pretty much all the populated areas are pretty much well covered with the catchment group models, but there's, if you look at the map, there's some gaps in it, which is mainly the more sparsely populated areas. So more of the big runs and obviously the forestry areas and some of the central Otago stuff, but yeah, there's pretty much contact throughout all of Otago at this stage.
Well,
Thank
good stuff.
you. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Sam. Michael Decker.
Thanks, Brian. Sam, excellent report. Thank you. Kia ora, Lloyd. Nice to see you there too. No, Sam, that was first rate. I loved your graphics. A question though, those bar graphs towards the end of your presentation show a darker blue bar representing direct funding, I think. I'd like you to explain to me what that money is used for.
So with the direct group fund, that is used to, we have a guideline amount of 10,000 and a max of 15,000 for groups with a bit of a matrix, but that funding is to get group admin, coordination, comms, contractors to be able to have their group run throughout the year. It's not enough funding to fund someone permanently or full-time, but it is enough to start that co-funding model for a catchment group, or enough to add to a co-funded model of a catchment group to have someone on the ground who's actually paid to do work for that catchment group.
Okay, thank you. So all that funding going out on those streams you've summarised for us, none of it is actually being spent on, say, wetland reclamation or planting projects or anything like that.
So we, in our seed and small project fund, we do have a rule of no capital expenditure that benefits one individual, but our seed and small project fund does have the ability to have a couple of plants or some plants thrown in with a sign. And that's more of about exposure and marketing of the catchment group. We don't have enough money for wetland restoration or habitat restoration, but we do have enough to help inspire the community to find more funding or to work together to achieve their goals.
I get that, thank you.
Cool. Gretchen?
I was wondering whether as a group, and I know it's really hard to measure the types of reach, I suppose, that you're creating through the projects that you're supporting, but whether you're working on any metrics to have a look where we're heading in Otago and the types, perhaps the types of work we're doing and area and meeting, you know, are there any metrics that we're going to have?
We haven't put any metrics together as of yet, but we are looking at building sort of how far are we reaching and working out. But that's more of our marketing on how we want to try and express OCC and catchment groups out. But we don't have any metrics, sorry.
But I mean, we do have, we're looking at forward planning and having a structure around all our catchment groups and feeding back information in terms of how they're all progressing, what the issues are, what the opportunities are.
Yes, so Brian is correct in that fact that we are looking at putting into play a couple of series of surveys to actually pull information around what catchment groups pressures are, what catchment groups needs are, to be able to adapt OCC's work plan to fulfill those needs.
Yeah.
It's like a really useful partnership for ORC and catchment groups to be able to track the progress we're making in Otago, I reckon.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is more than just surveys. We're talking about, you know, having a formal reporting structure, you know, so we're accountable to success. Any comment there, Lloyd?
Oh, yeah, I'd just like to add to that. So that's part of, so what Brian's talking about is to bring the structure and reporting so that we're going to get information as to what's actually happening on the ground within the catchment groups. So because our direct sport funding promotes the catchment group's ability to build the wetlands and to do the on the ground mitigants. So we want to start getting some information as to what's happening out on the ground as well.
Yeah, cool.
GIS capability will be crucial. And
Once we get mapping, is going to make it a whole lot easier.
Cool. Thank you. Kevin?
Just on that 190,000, and it probably is a question or as a statement, I'm not sure, but I'll get there. So with the likes of Noslem, so East Otago and Noslem, my understanding is it's just on or just over 1 million hectares that they actually, while their people are close, it's actually, my last count was 1 million hectares that those two groups actually cover. So the dots don't really give the full picture. So it's, that's just on 1 million hectares. But the 190,000 of which you give them 15,000 or 17,000, I think, to Noslem, that actually, the key part, while it pays for no plants or fences in the ground, it actually is the key parts that helps fund is their engagement officer and their coordinator, of which if they weren't there, the work actually wouldn't get done. So that's the key driver. So that's $15,000 towards 2 salaries that make that whole thing click. And if you go onto the Noslem website, you'll see the work that we're doing and you've just done a strategic report with them, or strategic overview with that committee now. So you're working really good in tandem with them. But if you go onto the Noslem website, you'll see the work that they are actually doing. So that $15,000 that we're currently doing, which is now currently contestable, is going a heck of a long way and doing a heck of a lot of very good stuff that's highlighted in that report, or on their website, which no doubt that will form part of what you're trying to coordinate as a report back to showing what catchment groups are doing. So.
Cool. I don't think there was a question in there. What's the
No, I said that. Will that form part of it?
Yeah,
I know there wasn't, but it's just like it sort of it sounded as though, and I'm sure Councillor Tipu wasn't inferring that, but it just like the work part was a small part of the fund, but in fact that 190,000 that we're putting out is the key component to drive all the catchment groups.
Yeah.
So.
And I'll just point out that, you know, the OCC has managed that transition for that funding that has gone to Noslem in this instance, because previously it was directly from the ORC and
that's right.
Via the OCC, so the ball hasn't been dropped there. Is there any comment, anybody?
Yeah, Kevin, I get all that, thanks.
Cool. Andrew?
Yeah, I just had a query about the Otago Conservation Board and also the QE2 Trust. Both those organisations have, well, the QE2 Trust came and presented to us a couple of 3 years ago, and they talked about potential synergies with the Otago Regional Council. Otago Conservation Board, I met with them maybe a couple of years ago, and they talked about similar things. But is there any opportunity for OCC when you're pursuing MFE funding to tap into potentially those sorts of organisations that perhaps would give you some, you know, whether it's a supporting letter or you know, do you have any connection with those two organisations in any way, shape or form, and would you see any benefit from having any connection?
Not in Otago, to be honest. I haven't met with them in the last year and a half. Have you got connections through OCC with?
No, not directly with those.
They
had discussions with QE2, but not with the Otago Conservation.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask a question then. My question is for Lloyd. So the OCC, you know, has done very well this last triennium. It's been formed, and you know, through a forming and a norming process. And there's actually been a lot of work in that, in terms of getting this organisation up, the employment of Tam, employment of Anna, Camille, and just getting all the simple processes and the structure. So I think we're at that point now in terms of, I think it's fair to say we're formed, we're probably normed, and Lloyd. So the future, you know, any comment on the future in terms of, because this is where the rubber meets the road, isn't it? In terms of maybe building catchment groups or just any sort of, because you've been through quite a challenging process with the Pomahaka, probably some initial gains and then.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'd like to say is don't take it too lightly. The commitment that the Otago Regional Council gave to the OCC to commit 3 years worth of funding was invaluable in making this thing happen. Without that, we would have still been floundering because you got to have that security of time.
Yeah.
So we've had our first year set up, and it's taken a bit more to set up than perhaps what we had appreciated. And we're dealing with, you know, a reasonable number of egos and that sort of thing. But we've got, as we say, we've got Sam and Anna on board. We've got our systems in place. We're getting our processes in place and where we see it going to the future. So probably from now on, it's really, and we're introducing, well, at our next meeting next week, pretty much introducing, reporting back so we can start tracking more what's actually happening on the ground. So that's going to take us to the next level where we go from set up to actually achieving stuff on the ground. Excuse me. Well, I think it's really important because by doing it the way we've done it, and Sam and Anna are really good because they are facilitating the landowners as opposed to instructing the landowners. So it's coming from the landowners, and it takes time for momentum to build. And we just, it's taken a while to get accepted, but I think we're in that space now, and we got pretty much the Otago covenant. It's just a matter of helping the people that are there to do the work to make the difference in the end.
Cool.
I think to add to that, the exciting thing about OCC is that we recognise every group is unique and every journey is unique. So to forecast the future is only an educated guess from us, because we like to be quick and nimble and change to the catchment group needs as they change themselves.
Cool. I think we had a similar discussion yesterday in relation to integrated catchment management project and potentially in the Catlands, and in terms of that nimbleness and sensitivity, and I'm hoping the OSC works constructively with the OCC and the local communities. And as you say, what's learned in the Catlands won't necessarily be transferable to other areas, but it's a good start as a pilot. A big thing, unless I do apologise, Gary, I do apologise. You never saw your hand there. And I think
no worries, thanks. Great report. And Sam, just my question was around, you're really doing an amazing job in what you've grown here and how it is evolving and getting bigger and bigger as more catchment groups come on board. With you and Anna and Camille as well, and the level of funding, I mean, the model as it evolves, is it sustainable at the level it's at, with the workload, with the resources that you have? Is that funding sufficient? Is it going to need to be more? Are you guys slaves to this, or is it actually, at a level that will work? Because there's only a handful, a small number of people there. If one was to leave, say, where does it leave the rest of the organisation? So look, it's great to see it growing like this, but then there's always the growing pains that come with that.
You are very correct, Gary, and the sort of workload that we do and the work that we have to encompass. I come from council down south as a staff member, and I kind of look at ourselves as kind of quite a large company within 3 people. We've all got multiple different roles, and we don't have a printer to go print off. So we do like to run ourselves on the smell of an oily rag in our sort of operational and sort of overheads, and try and fund a lot of, take that extra money that we have to go out to the catchment groups. You are correct in stating that there is a lot of work to be done. A lot of it is nighttime work, and there is a lot that we do that does go over time. But it is that thing that we are working with volunteers who are already doing that. So we're also trying to build that and try and work ways to make things a lot easier for them, which will also make things a lot easier for us. Forecasting the future, the next 2 years, so this year and next year, we do have enough funding to do what we want to do. We will either be needing to look for more funding in the 3rd year, either from here or from MPI or from MFE or another source, to carry on the plan that we are doing. Unless, if we don't have more funding, we will have to reshape how we look at that 3rd year and potentially 2nd year a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Sorry, Lloyd.
I think the funding question is a big question. It's quite, because it's working good now because we're in the startup phase. But when we go to the next phase, when we got a lot of our existing groups have got, or our umbrella groups have got central government funding through MPI. So if that funding was to dry up, then we're going to have to reassess our funding model. So it's something that I'm being pretty big on, and I've been talking a bit about recently, that we've got to try and get a funding model that's enduring for the catchment group process. So, and I think that's going to have to be a joint model, even if it was a regulated model through central and regional government bodies, because otherwise we're always going to be on artificial funding cycles, which is not beneficial to anybody. Yeah. But that's how things are going to progress over time.
Cool. Thank you, Lloyd and Sam. Kate.
I was going to ask a question. I really love that you're working with Landcare Trust. They're a great group. But the fact that you're using their capacity for mapping means that it's not actually, when we're funding you to do work, and in many ways, frustration for community groups is if we don't know what you know. And the way that we could know that is have those maps here. And I appreciate our GIS and all of those upgrades are happening. But I'm just wondering, is there a funding model or a funding stream that we could be looking at differently, that we can collect some more data from you using your outreach and putting in time the GIS back into the council here so that we can capture that data? It concerns me that we're putting it into a different body that we don't have access to ourselves. Very rich information.
We could work with either the IT team here or the catchment advisors here to actually develop those maps, and could actually just take it to ORC.
Yeah.
Or we could try and get a login key to be able to have an access to the GIS here. It's $2,500 for one license, so we'd have to get myself and Anna a license, and then a little bit of extra training on developing the project as well.
Seems a cheap investment to get. It seems cheap investment to capture ourselves. I mean, I think Landcare Trust, it's really safe to do it with, but they just need changes. And I think the value that there's an opportunity. I don't know where we can. I don't know how we develop that further, but I think there's
well, I think you've started a conversation, Kate, and I think it's fair to say, Sam, you're having relatively regular contact with the ORC, yes, and that's good. So there's opportunity. I think we're done, aren't we, guys? Yeah. So a big thank you to Sam and Lloyd. Keep the good work up.
Thank
you.
I hope you've got to.
And hope your recovery continues.
Yeah, no, it's a lot better now after. I don't recommend dislocating an artificial.
No.
No.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, remember that. Good advice.
Rugby has got a lot to look at.
Amanda, how do we get Liz to the front?
I've got them. Council, they're fantastic. I mean, we've got them. Not quite up there, but they're,
I'm old school. When you told me they were in the workroom, I thought you meant the work. Okay, everybody. Excuse me while I have everybody. Okay, who have we got here? Have we got a Dr. Isabel Young and Tracy Burton? Who am I talking to here? It's Tracy. I can see Tracy. Yeah.
We do indeed. Good morning. I'm just trying to get my camera going. There we go.
Cool. So who's going to talk to us? Welcome to the ORC Implementation Committee meeting.
Thank you for having us. It's going to be both of us. Tracy was going to kick it off. Tracy, can you hear us?
I'll see you, bro.
Excuse me. Okay. Who's going to kick it off?
for the mic issue.
Have we? I don't know if anybody's started talking about it.
Thanks, Tracy. Trying to.
Tracy?
Is this,
Can you hear us, Tracy?
is this reporting?
I just,
No. It's land information.
morning,
Tracy.
I can hear you from my end. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Fantastic, thank you.
you may have to speak just a little bit louder, Tracy. Is that good?
Speakers up.
How is that? A bit better?
That's amazing. You want to talk
Great.
now?
No, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. I had some mic and sound issues at this end, but I'm back online now, so I'm ready when you are.
Okay, well, we're waiting for a report from yourselves. I assume it's to do with lag recycling for Lake Dunstan and surrounds. Is that correct?
Yes, so we're going to provide you with a bit of an overview of, or an update of the work that Toitū Te Whenua Linz has been doing in the Otago region for the last 12 months. So that will include an update on the lag recycling issue, but also some of our terrestrial problems as well, work that we've been doing as well. Great. So I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay with everybody.
Perfect. And how long roughly is your presentation, Tracy?
We were told initially to aim for around 20 minutes with another 10 minutes or so for questioning, if that's all right.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great. We can speed things up if we need to. So just touch us. Okay. So you might see a picture of yourselves at the moment. Are you seeing the presentation if I share it like this?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great. Well, yeah, so thanks for having us today here. So you've got myself, Manager of Biosecurity Biodiversity in the Toitū Te Whenua Linz Biosecurity Program. I'm the People Manager and also the Functional Lead of the Aquatics Program. I've been in this role for about a year now, have come from Niwa, where I was a freshwater ecologist for the last 20 odd years. And so the Otago lakes are pretty much home to me. I've done a lot of the ecological monitoring in these lakes, particularly around the biosecurity issues over the years. We've also got Eni Isaby Gunn online, and Eni is our principal advisor in the biosecurity and biodiversity program. She's also our strategy lead and our lead of our terrestrial programs. So between the two of us, we'll give you a good overview of what Linz has been up to in the region. Sorry, I'm just it's not letting me flick through to the other slides. So I'm just going to pass over to Eni just to provide a bit of an update on our program and also to share with you the terrestrial program first up.
Right, good morning, everyone. I would have met a few of you last year when I presented on the aquatics work that we're doing. As we were asked to give an update on the Linz program in Otago, we decided to chuck in a short summary of the other work we do besides Lagarosiphon as well, so you get some visibility on that. So I assume you're all familiar with the roles and responsibility of our agency. So this is just a really brief overview of the various programs that we conduct as a team. Our terrestrial program involves the management of terrestrial weeds on Linz managed land, which is mainly along the shorelines of the lake beds and river beds that we look after in the braid plains of braided rivers. And our operations are guided by the Regional Pest Management Plan, particularly Good Neighbour rules. Where possible, we do try and go beyond that and work with adjacent landowners for larger landscape effects, and we're also involved in some predator control programs. The Aquatics Program you're all probably very well familiar with, and Tracy will provide an update on that and the lake weed management that we conduct in Otago particularly. I'd also like to just briefly mention our Jobs for Nature program. We were allocated 40 million over 4 years as part of that to enhance biosecurity and biodiversity across the land that we manage, and we're running one of those projects in Otago. National programs I won't touch on today unless there's any questions. We don't really do groundwork on species managed by national programs such as wilding and wallabies, but we do support those programs through various other ways. So if there is any questions on that, you can direct them at me at the end of the presentation. Can we jump to the next slide, please, Tracy? This is just a very brief overview of how we plan our operational program and then deliver it. So we hold stakeholder meetings in May, where we invite a bunch of relevant stakeholders such as yourselves to discuss progress with us and look at what we need to change in the annual program going forward in the coming year. We then develop our operational program for that year of how much we will spend at each site, what type of control work we will carry out, and we do that with our strategic delivery partners, Boffa-Miskell and NIWA, who manage the work on the ground for us. And then progress is monitored throughout the year. And again, we work closely with ORC here, the biosecurity team, and NIWA to inspect control works, do spot checks, and see how we're progressing. And then the cycle starts again in the following May. Just to mention for Otago specifically, we've actually started having monthly meetings with the biosecurity leadership team now. And we started that at the start of last financial year, if I remember correctly, and it's really helped us strengthen our relationship and look at regional priorities and strategic approach. So I'll just briefly touch on the terrestrial program. I know you're all probably more interested in the aquatic space, but I did want to make you aware that while the terrestrial program in Otago is a lot smaller than the aquatics program, there is a lot of work to be done. The key species that we control in line with good neighbour rules in Otago are gorse, broom, old man's beard, and our favourite, the rabbits. Gorse and broom is obviously a major problem which requires ongoing control, and we try to maintain those control works along riverbeds and shorelines every year, and we work at numerous sites. It's our largest terrestrial program in Otago out of all of the other species in Otago that we manage. Old man's beard, we manage at only a couple of sites at the moment, but we know the problem is much bigger and needs a more strategic coordinated approach. So we're now working closely with RC biosecurity team to look at survey information that they have for us, I hear, over the coming weeks to discuss how we can tackle that problem more strategically. Regarding rabbits, it's been amazing to see RSC step up with inspections and coordinating activities among landholders towards tackling the rabbit problem in Otago. We carried out rabbit control work at a couple of sites this year, including at Lake Dunstan during the past financial year, and we're now working again closely with RSC and their consultant AICA on planned control operations in particular communities where the problem is significant. And just to mention, we also run some predator control projects in different areas, and in Otago we have one up in the Reese River, and that's done in conjunction with DOC doing predator control in the Dart River, so we're trying to work in with them to enhance biodiversity in that area. So the next slide is just a really quick snapshot to remind everyone that our control program is visible online. So on the LINS website, you can see which sites we worked on throughout the past year and where we're planning to do works in the current year. And it shows you not only the site, but also the type of control, whether it's aquatic, terrestrial, or predator control. Next slide, Tracy, was just a really brief mention of our Jobs for Nature project that we're running in Otago. This project we're doing in conjunction with Lake Dunstan Charitable Trust. And the funding is mainly going towards restoration plantings, which is something that within our BAU budget, we don't have that much space for, but the Jobs for Nature funding really allowed us to support the work that some of the community groups in the area were already doing. So the work involves weed removal along the lake edge, controlling willows, mulching, improving the area for planting, establishing pockets of native plantings and protecting them against people as well as rabbits, and providing irrigation and maintenance for them to get started. Now, to support that work, there is some funding in there to support a project manager and an engagement coordinator. And another output of this project has been creating a community vision, which the Trust just presented last month, as far as I know. And that will hopefully set the direction for more work going on in the future. On the picture here, you can see the various areas along the lake side where the community would like to work. Now, the funding obviously doesn't stretch to all of this during the Jobs for Nature funding, but the Trust is now looking at attracting sponsors for these next phases. And yeah, we look forward to see how this develops. Right now, this was just a quick recap on progress and opportunities that we've seen in the last year. And I would really just like to acknowledge the ORC biosecurity team who've been fantastic to deal with. And I think we're both on both sides seeing some great benefits coming out of that closer relationship that we've established with really regular meetings between people from the leadership to explore how we can best tackle regional priorities together. As we manage little slithers of land, you know, we struggle achieving large landscape effects, and that's where working with the council who can help us engage adjacent landowners is really beneficial. And yeah, we've managed to step up alongside ORC, conducting some work that we hadn't previously conducted in some high profile areas such as the rabbit control. So that's been a great step forward last year, and there's obviously a lot more to do in the coming years alongside ORC biosecurity team. So that's a very quick overview of what we do in the terrestrial space. And I hope I didn't take too much of your time, Tracy. I'll hand over to you to talk about the Aquatics Program.
Yeah, thanks, Annie. The Aquatics Program, I'm just starting with a picture of Lagrosiphon here, but I'm not going to go into the actual plant itself because I understand that you had a presentation delivered to you last year just from Mary De Winton from NIWA that talked about the ecology of Lagrosiphon and the real problem it is. But I guess, you know, I can never highlight enough that the problem that this plant poses. I mean, of course, it's a super spreader. It's known as a space evader in terms that it comes in and it very quickly transforms their environment for the worse, which many of you will be very well aware of from that region. So the overall purpose of our Lin's Lake Weed Control Program, and it's not just in the Otago lakes, but we also manage weed control programs up in the Rotorua Tiara lakes, in the Bay of Plenty, in the Waikato River and Lake Karapiro, and also the Waitaki lakes, being Benmore and Aviemore mainly as well. But the key purpose of our program really is just to control and reduce the impact the weeds are having on lake users, but also on the environmental reasons, cultural, recreational and economic reasons there as well. So another key part of this program is to support and try and prevent the spread of weed to new lakes and sites. And of course, just not just maintaining the gains, but also reducing the extent that the weed is currently. Now, I've started with a map here of the Otago system because I think this is a really important thing to note with the Otago lakes in particular, is that we are dealing with a system. So while each of the lakes are quite similar, we can see up here in Lake Wanaka where we've had Lagrosiphon as early as 1972. Of course, we've got Lagrosiphon now up in the head of the Kawara River there since at least 2008. And of course, all of these lakes are having, because this weed's spread by fragments, we've got fragments moving down the Clutha River and the Kawara River system straight into Lake Dunstan, which, as you know, has been habitat saturated now for a long time. When I say habitat saturated, of course, that means that the weed is where it's going to be in that lake, it's doing its worst. It can't get any worse essentially with Lagrosiphon. It's inhabiting all the possible areas that it can do in that lake system at the moment. If I do look at the lakes individually though, I mean, of course, Lake Wanaka is one of our biggest aquatic programs. And in this lake, we have a budget of around $1.25 million. And we have a contribution coming in from the Queenstown Lakes District Council there too of 20K. And our goal in this lake is to contain the spread and progressively remove Lagrosiphon from Lake Wanaka. So this is a really interesting case because I'm not aware of anywhere around the world that they've taken this kind of approach. So it's pretty ambitious, but obviously we believe that this lake is worth protecting, because if we allowed it to spread through the reaches of this lake, we're going to have a lot bigger problem. So in this lake, as you hopefully are already aware, we've obviously created some different zones in this lake. So there's invisible containment and control lines across the reaches there. We've got an eradication zone. buffer zone and our target control zone. And each around the shoreline of that lake, we've got about 48 management units, which is how we plan our operations in that area and determine top priorities. But over the last 12 months, if we have a look at how we're doing, so up in that eradication zone, in that zone there, we've got about 25 shoreline reaches, and our contractors checked 17 units of the management units. They kind of alternate yearly depending on the risk that each site poses as well. So this year we covered 87 kilometres by the end of April. And any weeds in that area, and there were still some plants, and we expect this to be that the odd plants popping up, but we were able to manage them through carrying out good surveillance and hand weeding, and overall we're really happy with the gains that we've still made in that eradication zone. So we're still holding the line there and maintaining any gains from previous control works. So that's a good outcome in that eradication zone. In the buffer zone, of course, we carry out again a lot of surveillance and a lot of work there, mainly with hand weeding and the lights, just to maintain clear shorelines, with the idea that we're hoping that we'll be able to move that eradication line further down the lake as we can push lagrosiphon out of the lake altogether, obviously being the big ambition at the end of it. So there were a number of management units worked on by contractors in the past financial year, and overall 45 catch bags of lagrosiphon weed were removed. So even though this is still quite a lot, this is what we expect from this buffer zone, where we've still got some high infestations obviously showing in that map on the green there in the target zones. So we're pretty happy with that too. So we're achieving minimal biomass in the area. Just the fact that we can hand weed those weed beds says something. Like, yep, 45 catch bags is a lot of weed, but it's not much in the terms of what's around in the rest of the lake. So happy with that result as well. The target control zone, so these are the areas that we're really actively trying to get on top of the lagrosiphon, again with the view of being able to get rid of it. So particularly in that western side there, down in Paddocks Bay, Parkins Bay area, we're using Hessium as our main control tool, hand weeding where we can, and we are still using herbicide, Diquat being that tool there, and carrying out hygiene at the boat ramps and jetties. So what I mean by hygiene is mostly diver controlled work, and we're just ensuring that there is no lagrosiphon plants around any areas that have the potential for boats to come in and take it out to help prevent the spread of this weed to other lakes. In the Paddock Bay and Parkins to Fernburn area, we laid Hessium on very large scales there. You can see there nearly 10,000 metres squared of it's laid in Paddock Bay this last financial year, and 20,000 metres of it from Parkins to Fernburn. So there's a lot of new Hessium down there, and we're really happy with the result of that. So in that western target zone alone, which is the one on the left there, we're pretty, from NIWA's latest monitoring, they're pretty confident that we've got about 82% of the shoreline free of weed in that area. So that's a pretty big success. But, you know, it's still weed present, and there's a lot of maintenance that still needs to be carried out in that area. We did have some poor outcomes, though, in Glentow Bay in the last 12 months. We're working with NIWA and our biosecurity partner BOFA just to look at what other options we have to try and control the weed in that area, but essentially the herbicide treatments and stuff just were not effective. Could have been because of, well, a number of reasons, but checking weed condition too, whether there's too much sediment sitting on those plants for the herbicide to be effective. At boat ramps and other hygiene sites such as jetties, we had good overall control, so that was a great result. And that's also on the eastern target zones there too, so we're talking about the major jetties and boat ramps. Moving into Lake Whakatipu and the Kawara River. So the goal for Lake Whakatipu, of course, is exclusion and eradication of lagrosiphon and in Lake Whakatipu. So don't want it there, not prepared to accept that we are going to let that one get away. So That's one of our key priorities there, of course. And in the Kawara River, which of course is knocking on the door there of the Frankton Arm, we're aiming for progressive containment in the upper Kawara Arm, and I'll explain what that means a little bit more in a moment. The budget for this area is around 530,000 from Lynn's contribution, and 20,000 comes from the Queenstown Lakes District Council again for that area. Now you can see on the map on the right hand side there, we've got a number of management units up in that Kawara River. And I guess the key thing to note about this area is that this area is still heavily infested with weed, although we're doing our best to control it. And I'll show you some of the outcomes. We've got a lot of hessium laid in there now. We're still using herbicide, particularly in those harder to reach areas where willow poses a significant problem for us being able to control the weeds close to the shore. The largest concern for this area is just how close it is there to the Frankton Arm. While it is at the headwater there of the water coming out, those jet boats coming in and out of that area, particularly those jet boats, pose a significant threat to the lake, and we'll see that in some of the results in a moment. Excuse me. So in Lake Whakatipu, we've carried out surveillance around the entire lake margin of Whakatipu. So that's actually having divers and snorkelers on a tow rope being pulled around the entire margin. They're looking for lagrosiphon. So we're really confident that they've got around and seen the sites there. We check high risk areas such as Kingston and the Frankton Arm at least 3 times a year, and last year that happened in October, February and April. And I'll show you the outcomes for that in a moment, but again, the key thing to note in that Frankton Arm is that we've got approximately 80 hectares of habitat there that was well suited to lagrosiphon. So that's large flat areas that are above 6 meters or shallower than 6 meters in depth. So lagrosiphon is going to quite happily grow down to that 6 meter mark. And where we have these large flat landscapes on the lake bed, that's a lot of surface reaching weed bed, if you could imagine. That's possible in that Frankton Arm area. So extremely high risk for us to manage that. The outcomes for this area. So while some plants were found earlier with the control works at Kingston, right down the other end of Whakatipu there, no plants were found by NIWA in our outcome monitoring. So that's a really great sign. The plants that were found initially have been hand weeded, and the divers noted that just due to their location and the size of the plants, it looked like these were possibly fragments that had come off boats in terms of anchors from anchor wells or motors, the likes. So again, just that's their impression, but to find plants right down the end, of course, these plants have to be transported down there. Plants were also found at the Frankton Marina in May this year. So that was a real concern. So there was about 19 plants found underneath the marina. We worked with the marina owners to tackle this one really quickly, just for obvious reasons. It poses a significant risk, and we're definitely going to need to work more with ORC, who are holding that, just in terms of how we're going to be able to manage that infestation in the marina. We also found 2 plants in the Frankton Arm adjacent to the Hilton Hotel Jetty, and there was another plant on the southern side of the boat hire pontoon at Sugar Lane that we'll need to keep an eye on. And no plants detected along the Kingston foreshore or at the boat ramp in the last inspection, so that's really great. One thing I was going to mention about the Frankton Marina, and I'll just bring it back in now. So, 19 plants were found in May, but a really key thing to note is that the divers also inspected the same site in December 2021, so only 5-6 months earlier, and there were no plants present at that time. So it just shows you how fast these plants can actually establish once they've been allowed to enter into a different area. Now, in the Kawara River, of course, there's a number of complications for weed control up here, and just due to the flow and also the condition of the weed and the location of the weed underneath a lot of those willows. So you can see that while we've been using hessium, and that's a diver laying the mats down there, we've also had our contractors coming in there spraying as close into the bank, hitting some of those surface reaching lagrosiphon beds as they can. And some mixed results up in the Kawara River. So yes, we're still making progress, but there are still large weed beds present in the area that we need to get on top of and maintain. But we are using more hessium, we're getting good control from it, and the maintenance is to be expected. So you can see in that bottom photo there, that's some hessium being laid, and where the mats overlap or where there's a breakdown, you can see the plants take every advantage that they can there to sprout away. Now, Lake Dunstan. This is an interesting one, of course, because now you have seen the other lakes. You've seen that we're obviously aiming to progressively remove lagrosiphon from Whakatipu, still a long way off. We've got in Lake Wanaka, we've got Lake Whakatipu, which is essentially weed-free, but with weed at the doorstep there in the Kawara River, and these lakes are all feeding down to Lake Dunstan. So really this affects what vision we can hope to have for this lake. But at this stage, our goal is to, of course, reduce the effects and the impacts of the weed on the way that the lake is used and the ecological values of this lake as well. So we're still carrying out diver control to remove the weeds at boat ramps and other hygiene sites, purely again looking at that we want to contain the weed that's in Lake Dunstan. We don't want it spreading. It's a huge risk for Lake Whakatipu and other lakes in the region that doesn't have the weed, just due to the sheer numbers of users in the region. And we're also carrying out herbicide. I mean, that's our main tool in this lake. It gives us the biggest and the best option we've got to knock that weed away from the lake surface so that we don't end up with photos like you see on the right there. We've got a budget of around 210,000 in this lake from our LINS contribution, and we also receive 60,000 in contributions from Contact Energy, and we also receive 50,000 from Otago Regional Council for this work in Lake Dunstan as well. And overall in Lake Dunstan, we did have a really good herbicide control in December 2021. So that means that we were able again to knock these weeds back. And we had mixed outcomes from the herbicide control that was occurring in March this year. And when I say mixed, it's kind of like, it's good in some areas, not so great in others. Plenty of reasons for that we're exploring. Places like Bendigo is an interesting one for us. 1 year we'd have a good control, but we've also had 2 years now where we have effectively not had any control from our dicot treatments. So that's a real concern for us as well. So in the aquatic weed space, I mean, we've got a number of challenges, and I'm just going to touch on this one before I finish up and allow some questions there. But of course, we do have a limited toolbox. There's tools in the toolbox, but every lake is so different. We've seen the 3 main lakes that we're looking at, and they've all got differences in terms of their topography, in terms of the water chemistry, water quality, sedimentation through flow. So we've got these really unique conditions, and we don't have any one tool that's our silver bullet. So you can see from the different types of control tools that we're using, we're really working with NIWA and the experts in this space, just trying to determine exactly what our best options are to work with this weed. The social views is a really key one for us. So, I mean, more than ever before, probably these weeds are at the forefront of people's minds. It's the normal situation in biosecurity when we're doing a really good job. Nobody notices until, the weeds are at the surface. So there's a number of issues here, I guess, like behaviour change. So we really need to work more with Otago Regional Council and other agencies such as MPI and the Check Clean Dry, just to really raise people's awareness of these weeds, and not just raising their awareness that the weeds are there, but how they're moved about, so that there's still the misconceptions that these weeds are spread by birds. No, that's not true. That's definitely a people problem. The misconception that they don't need to worry about the weeds in the lake because they're already there. So why do we need to check, clean and dry? We can't make it any worse. Well, yep, but you can make other lakes a lot worse in the region. And the sheer fact too that we've got a Geria now knocking on the door, which it's currently in lakes in the West Coast, and it's also in the Avon River in Christchurch. And I see Egeria as being one of the biggest threats to these lake systems. If people think that lagrosiphon is a problem in the Otago lakes, Egeria is a whole nother kettle of fish. It grows deeper, more denser, and we're going to have a lot more problems with the control tools that we have available. So we need to do everything we can and work with every party that'll work with us in that to ensure that we can help keep that weed out. And of course, I mean, social views too takes in things like our social license. So of course, we are very precautious in the tools that we do use in terms of herbicide particularly, and there's a lot of communities out there that still are very risk adverse, and we just need to work with the community to allow them to see that we are doing the best we can with what we've got. Resources, of course, is another huge challenge for us, even just in the last 12 months, resulting from COVID and a whole raft of reasons. There's price increases and there's the availability of materials. We're really lucky to source hessium, for example, in the quantities that we want this year. So we're facing a lot of these challenges and they're not going away. So while prices are increasing, our budgets unfortunately are not increasing. So we've got this continual need to balance high priority sites with the resources that are available to do the job. And as I mentioned, with Egeria and hornwort, which currently is only in the North Island, of course, but with these species in New Zealand and moving about as well, huge risk of new species that we have to tackle.
Oh,
I'm not sure if anyone's interested there just in the overall budgets, but I just pulled them together. So I guess that the key thing to note there that I would like to make is that, you know, this is our LINZ's largest program of work, particularly in the aquatic space there, where we've got nearly $750,000 being invested. But we really do need to work with other parties to increase that if we're to do more. And that amount that we're currently investing in the area, of course, is still under question a lot in terms of how we are prioritising that money for this region over others. So just wanted to put that note in there. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Before I open to questions, just like to acknowledge the work and the budget that's been put into our region. So a big thank you for that. You know, lagrosiphon, the particular focus on Wanaka, and then Tipu and Lake Dunstan. Thank you. Thank you for your work in relation to other pests, for example, rabbits and the budget and so forth. No doubt there'll be questions from that. Sorry.
Sorry, I thought Carmen might have been first.
Sorry, I never saw Carmen's hand. I do apologise. I'm quite happy for Carmen to go first.
No, why you My question is around pest control and wondering whether LINZ has, because we've got a regulatory role in that area.
Yeah.
And LINZ has is operating under the good neighbour rule. I wonder whether LINZ has any appetite to sign up for the general rules that we have that aren't good neighbour rules that government departments can work under, but as the rules that everybody else operates under.
Okay.
I guess appetite needs to be balanced with what budget we have available. Right now, you know, the budgets are spread very thin with doing what we're already doing. We're very much taking direction from ORC as to where priorities should lie. And to do anything beyond that, we would need significantly more budget. At the moment, I'm not sure when we will get another chance at a budget bid to increase the program. And even then, within the good neighbour rules, there would be a lot more work for us to probably do. And we're working closely with ORC to look at, you know, what the situation is on LINZ land beyond what we're currently working on. So while it would be wonderful to do, I think we're still far away from being able to do that at this time.
Would you be prepared to join, wanted to call them catchment groups, pest management groups in an area that we are setting up, have set up some of and are continuing to set up, which involve all the people in the area signing up effectively for something
We're aware of the catchment groups that are forming. So we've been kept in the loop by the person who's organising that with RSC at the moment. We will join the conversation in any of the catchment groups where we manage land and are responsible for that land. But again, the amount of work we'll be able to do will very much be guided by our roles and responsibilities and the budget we have. The challenge we have right now with, if you imagine the program that we're running, as soon as we would move funding to a different site, we would have to stop the works at those sites where we previously worked, which would be with the weeds that we're managing a massive loss on investment and of ground gained. So additional work coming in would either take funding from those sites or would require additional budget. So while yes, we are absolutely involved in the conversation of those catchment groups going forward in the future, as well as the work that ORC is planning in various community groups for joint rabbit control. Wherever we manage land, we'll be part of that conversation as a land manager to understand what we need to do to join the effort within our roles and responsibilities. But within the budget constraint, we will have to work at prioritizing where we have compliance work that absolutely must be done, and where there is the, what we would like to do on top of that, and whether we can afford to do that. Tracy, does that?
Yeah, just one last question. Yes, I do understand. Just one last question. Would you be prepared on a staffing level to pass on if there are groups where the thing getting in the way of a joint effort is that you are not funded for a joint effort, to pass on that to your political people to explain why you not being funded for that is causing mischief in the, do you see where I'm going with that? Because there's no point having a group all getting together except for government departments who say we're not,
Completely agree. And it's, we all suffer that when we try and do work on our land and the surrounding parties aren't doing the same control. So I completely agree with you, and it's part of the picture that we're trying to paint internally at the moment to highlight the great work that's going on and the limitations of our resourcing that we face at the moment to, contribute beyond what we're responsible for. So that story and cost pressure and resourcing requirement is definitely currently being told.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make the point that Hillary's point is well made. It's really important that you stay part of that conversation. Our approach is only as good as its weakest link. Thank you. I've got Carmen, Alexa, and Michael Laws. So we'll start with Carmen.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for the report. It's very good, very lightning. I have two questions. Is there either, it has been, I'm right, in the past, has there been either in-kind funding or a contribution made by the other councils? So you've got Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago. Have they funded? And my second question is just about Bendigo, but could we ask about—
No, the first question,
yes,
what's that in relation to, please?
And the money mix.
Okay.
They're asking for more. You can see they want to do more, but we're constrained by budgets.
Okay.
And I'm wanting to ask you, what has their response been, please?
So look, at this stage, of course, these people are these agencies are a part of our stakeholder meetings, and at this stage we've only had contributions from the Queenstown Lakes District Council, of course, Otago Regional Council there as well, but we haven't had responses from anyone else. But on the flip side, we can probably be more proactive. We haven't actually gone directly and asked for the funding either.
Okay, there's something to think about.
Yes, it is. And the second one, at Bendigo, you made an interesting point about some years it works up there to do with the eradication, and other years it doesn't. Is there any rhyme or reason? Is it temperature controlled?
Yeah, and I'll just take that word. Sorry, straight off you there, Carmen. I'm sorry, my voice is at the end of a cold here. Sorry, councillor. So. It is an interesting case up in Bendigo there, and we're not 100% sure. So, of course, the dicot is deemed ineffective if it hits any sediment on the plant. So we have people check the condition of that weed before spray events, because of course if it is covered in sediment, we're not going to get that result that we want, and it is a waste of money. So those results, that those weeds are checked, but it could be things like temperature that we're looking at. It might be the flow, so we're wanting to investigate more about the flow, because we need, when we put dicot on a weed bed, we need a set contact time for that spray to be effective. But even when we think we've got all of these conditions right, something up there is causing our controls to be ineffective. So I don't have an answer for that one really, except to say that we're definitely looking into what some of those reasons might be.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alexa?
Kia ora, Tracy, and thank you for this. It's great to have this conversation. Some of us that live up in that area of the world are really worried about these lakes. Dunstan has been allowed to get into a terrible state, and Wakatipu is under threat, as you've outlined. So what I want to know is, how do we work better together, lift this level of work? Of course, to lift the level of work, there needs to be changes in what the constraints of your workloads and your responsibilities. So we need to understand what those are, and we need to understand the funding, and then convince the society that they want to pay for getting this stuff done. So that's kind of how I see the process of getting more done here. And I just want to know from you how we can start on that process together.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a few things that are kicking off that in the last even 12 months that have really helped. So you heard Eni talk about our closer relationship with the biosecurity team at Otago Regional Council. So we're working more with them now to identify those key areas. And I think a big part of our role with the council going forward is going to be looking at ways that we can increase the views of the community to, like you said, bring them along for this ride. Because I mean, a lot of our complaints, even down in Lake Dunstan at the moment, would be the type of questions that I would be asked are, you know, why are you spending so much in these other lakes but spending less in our lake, for example? So we need people to understand that bigger picture of what we're doing in the system. There's no point us putting more money at the moment, for example, in Lake Dunstan, when we've still got the weed coming in from these other areas. So while we want to tackle them and hit them as hard as we can, because of course it comes down to that kind of economics theory as well, that it's cheaper over the long run to actually hit these areas and aim for eradication than to let them spread and be carrying out control for forevermore. No easy answer in that one yet, but definitely want to work more with Otago Regional Council. We're obviously pulling in all the experts that we can through NIWA and our biosecurity specialists, being Bofamiscal. So we're just, and the different stakeholders that we work with. So it's about bringing everyone on board. So for example, one thing that I'm really keen to see progress in the next year would be signage around that bridge there that goes from the Kawara up into the Frankton Arm. So we did our site inspections back there in May, and while there's a place there for the jet boats to stop, and it's got signage up on the shore bank. Just even in the one visit that we were there, the first jet boat just comes straight past us, straight back into the lake, no stopping. You know, I think we've got a lot of work to do around the communication of what's happening in these lakes, and if it means better signage, working better with the community to get these messages across, I think that's one of the key areas that we need to work in.
Might need to be more than signage. You might have to talk to a regulatory arm and processes.
Just one quick supplementary
Yeah.
to that. Do you have, is what you've just explained to us, do you have that on a website somewhere? Is there somewhere we can, that you know, that why you are concentrating on the source of Dunstan's problem rather than on Dunstan itself? Is that explained for people to be able to see?
Look, I'm not aware of it being on any website as such yet, so that's probably another gap that we can have a look at. It is communicated really clearly in those stakeholder meetings, and we're looking at getting more information out to the community. So for example, even at the moment, we've got a draft 2-page article for the local newspaper down there, again, just explaining Liz's approach to weed control. So definitely looking at reaching the community in other ways. But this is another area where I think we really need to work with the regional council as well, because while we're contributing to the Lake Weed Control Program, LINZ doesn't take on the responsibility of kind of getting the message out to the whole of the community either. So I think that is really a combined effort that we all need to focus on,
right,
to ensure that messaging gets out.
We need to take that on board, don't we, Alexa?
Yeah, we do.
Michael Laws.
First of all, this is a massive improvement over where we were 5 years ago, so good on you. And I mean that most sincerely. When Boffa Miskell were involved in this, theirs was a campaign of neglect. This is a campaign much more proactive, so thank you. I live in Cromwell, which is the primary town that borders Lake Dunstan. And the issue that you've just raised now about how the community views it is that we do view that we are neglected on this issue related to Lagrosiphon. I understand your logic that you need to eradicate it from Wakatipu, but at the moment, the eradication or the control in Wanaka is so slow that it doesn't seem that LINZ nor the Otago Regional Council can offer the people of Dunstan or who border Lake Dunstan any degree of confidence at all. Am I right in surmising that your real problem is money? If there was a cash injection placed into your control efforts into Lake Wanaka, for example, that was more considerable than the cash that you have now, would you be able to eradicate Lagrosiphon from Lake Wanaka?
That's a great question, Councillor Laws, and I guess, you know, like I said before, there is no silver bullet, but I mean, a increase in funding would absolutely help the cause. I mean, you've seen what our plan is. I mean, we need to work on that system plan and to remove weed from Wanaka, and absolutely that's a budget question. I don't know how much of a budget though, and I think that's something that we could probably look at internally. But yeah, in short answer, I totally,
Well, can I
understand. Yep.
Can I follow that up? Because I think you've hit the nail on the head. What's frustrating for me over the past 5 years of having been a regional councillor is that I've never got a straight answer to the straight question of how much money, what would the budget be to do what you want to do? And I'm waiting for someone to provide that information. You're the obvious people. You have the expertise. You have the management responsibilities, or the primary management responsibility. If you could say, listen, we need 3 million and this is what the program would look like, that would be good. Then it'd be simply a question of funding that program and finding the sources of funding. But at the moment, without a budget, it's impossible to go to anybody and say, whether they're territorial authorities, the Otago Regional Council, gosh, even charitable trusts like the Lakes Charitable Trust that struggles to give away money every year because they don't have enough applicants, that you could collectively gather money to do what is required. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, look, we've actually got a meeting coming up in the next, excuse me, voice is going again there. We do have a meeting in the next month actually with our key partners and experts in that space, being NIWA and Boffa Miskell, primarily just to discuss our strategy for those lakes. So I think that'd be a key question in it. I think it's not as simple as just working out the area and, you know, pulling some sums together for diquat and hessium, because of course it's repeat treatments and the maintenance. But I think this is an exercise that would be really useful and that we can do. And maybe that is something that I can apply to the different avenues for funding, because the reality is I would need someone in terms of like in the NIWA space to actually tackle this and be able to provide us with an answer, which of course is funding issue again. So yep, leave that one with me, Councillor Laws, and I will at least investigate what we need to do to get to that point that we can have this exercise completed.
I can't stress enough to you how abandoned we feel. You know, we're watching our lake, our asset, degraded to a point that it is, in many cases, unusable and is reliant upon weather conditions and sediment, as you say, even to control the Lagrosiphon and the recreational areas that you spray.
Cool.
No, I absolutely agree. And again, I can't just say enough. Like we're essentially, you know, having to balance those priority sites in that lake with the resources that we've got, and it isn't enough. And I completely understand the feeling that the community has there. I've seen the effects firsthand, and you know, I'm concerned myself. But it's unfortunately just the position that we're in at the moment. Lagrosiphon's not going away in a hurry. And I think, again, the key thing that we really want to get across to the community is that, yes, we've got lagrosiphon in it, it is an issue, but I can't stress enough either how much more of an issue we would have if we had Egeria or Hormort in those lakes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Michael. If it's okay, I'll move on. I've had a whisper in my ear regarding timing, apologies, but so we've got two outstanding questions, one from me before I go to Kevin. Mine's just a quick response. Are you involved in the contact energy review process that's currently going on around Lake Dunstan?
I can answer that one. So, sorry, I was looking at Eni there as well, but so we do have a portfolio manager working with the Lake Dunstan Charitable Trust, and I know that just recently that we've been asked to review or have a look at one of those plans, but we're not working directly with Contact Energy, no.
Okay, but you have some involvement, but I just signal that that's going on in the background, and I would have thought you're a stakeholder. So maybe that's something to look at. Thank you, Kevin. Just briefly, if we may.
It is really scary to me hearing that answer you've given to Council Laws, that we actually don't understand the quantum of fixing the problem, or a rough idea of the quantum of fixing that problem. And if that goes to the other species problems, the terrestrial species problems on Lynn's land, that's quite difficult, because it is a government department. I thought we'd need that total to at least ask for that amount of money to fix the problem. Because and looking at your map that you gave us before, where you were doing work on eradication, I may have been wrong, but I didn't actually see anything in North Otago, and we know that there's Lynn's land around the Mauraki township and the likes that they're trying to do an eradication program at the moment. So if you've got no funding to do that, do you require us to put an abatement notice or something on you to actually force you to do that work, which you'll react to? It just seems not a very nice way to do that. But if you've got no money to do it and aren't going to do it because you haven't got the money, what other options have we got? And would you like...
Points well made. Points well made. Is there a response?
Sorry, can I just have clarity? Was what species are we talking here? We're talking terrestrial.
You're talking rabbits?
Yeah, gorse broom, old man's beard, all that stuff, and particularly around the Mauraki area at the moment, there is a rabbit program that we're trying to get going up that way. So I'm basically talking North Otago. I just couldn't see any dots in North Otago, but I may have missed something. But okay. So if you've got a problem there, and you don't get a regularly stamp put on you, how are you actually going to go and fix that if you've got no budget?
I'm not waiting for regular stamps in that case, but we are obviously looking very much to be kept in the loop and informed about the priority sites where ORC would like us to continue rabbit operations. So through that ongoing conversation with biosecurity team at the moment, we are trying to stay on top of which priority sites need to be managed, where we have Lynn's land and where we need to join the community in doing rabbit control. The sites that we managed this past financial year were two of those sites where we had conversations or it was highlighted to us through a compliance notice at one of those sites. And we're hoping to preempt the compliance notices by having that monthly engagement to find out about these kind of initiatives. Our visibility on the ground is limited due to the lack of boots on the ground. So that's where really those monthly conversations are helping us identify those sites. With regards to having the budget to do this work, no, we don't have a dedicated budget for rabbit control at this moment. It hasn't been part of one of our past budget bids or had an allocated pot of money. So this is our struggle at the moment, that as we learn about the community projects for rabbit control that are led by ORC, or as we're getting compliance notices or being informed about sites that do need control on Lynn's land for rabbits, we're currently having to scramble to see where we can take that money from, because we obviously need to follow
Okay.
suit.
Okay, thank you. Your point's well made, and Kevin's question was well made. He's already getting a phone call from the Maraki residents. A big thank you. Keep it up. I'd encourage you to be nimble about looking at your future responsibilities, but thank you. Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Right, we're going to have
Can that be on our website or something? Can that presentation be somewhere?
On diligence, I've asked for a copy, but put it on the website.
But on it somewhere.
We're going to have a 1 minute break
because we're having a discussion in public about something that we haven't got the background paper for.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. 1 minute break. I'll ask the transportation team for the next agenda item. Okay, welcome everybody back to the Implementation Committee. Our next agenda item is one regarding continuation of half-price public transport fares. The purpose of this paper is to seek decision from council on whether to continue the current half-price public transport fare initiative until the end of January next year, and then to implement the central government's community connect half-price public transport fare initiative from that time period onwards for community service card holders using public transport. And then thirdly, regarding the potential extension of the eligibility of Super Gold Card concession travel. So welcome everybody, Gary, Julian, Doug and Gavin. No.
Maybe move minutes on.
Thank you. Happy to motion for you.
Okay, that's interesting. I do apologize. Okay, confirmation of the minutes. I've read the minutes. I'm happy to move the minutes. Was that Kate News or Carmen or second in the minutes? I put the motion to accept the minutes. Those for, aye, against, carried. And then we've got the action items. I will just get back through the items. Okay, action items. I understand that the green section is completed, and the only other action item is the environmental limitation quarterly update. And that was in relation, it's in progress to develop a credible methodology to measure effectiveness of the pest management plan in regards to combating. And Dr. Palmer, Gavin, do we know when that's going to be due? That's going to be brought back to the September Data and Information Committee.
Chairman, that's what we're endeavouring to do at the moment.
Endeavouring to do. So thank you. I'm sure we'll get a work in that. So apologies, here we are again. And I missed that first report. It's a bit difficult. Don't need the IT. So we're going to the continuation of half-price fare. So before I open it up for questions, I'm going to invite either Gary, Julian, Doug or Gavin to speak to this report. Who would like to do that? Okay, thank you.
You'll be aware, thank you, Jim, you'll be aware that the government has a continuation of half-price fares, which is both for public transport in Queenstown and Dunedin, and includes the Queenstown Ferry as well. The Community Connect initiative, what we're working through nationally is to attach it to the national ticketing system. So it makes it a seamless progression to get that in there. But that again will continue on the 50% discount for community services holders. And there's no end date on that. So that will continue beyond the January 23 date when the users. And Super Gold card holders, it's to take their use outside the 9 to 3 limit that they have at the moment.
Yeah.
Beyond 3, so into peak times. Gary's and Julian will be happy to talk to us.
Just happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, sure. Well, before I kick it off, is it fair to say that it's actually for the first two items, continuation of the current half-price public transport fare and the community gold card initiatives to follow the road? That's actually relatively straightforward. I mean, the central government putting up the money, and as long as it doesn't impact on say our resource in terms of buses and so forth, and I think we put a line in the sand with that. Is that fair? That's relatively straightforward. If maybe if there was an issue of contention, it's possibly in relation to the super gold card. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to open it up for questions. Kevin?
Yeah, page 24. Just see what the chair has said that continuation will happen with the government, but what actually does happen to the total mobility half price that's currently happening?
Total mobility will continue with that. It is not included in the Community Connect, however, which is the community services element.
Right, but what you've currently got now on total mobility will continue through.
That's correct.
It will continue through until January 2023, and then any support will be removed. The federal government's that'll change at that point. Yeah.
That will end at that point.
End at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, so at that point, we may be giving your community keep half price, but not the total mobility half price.
That's correct, unless the total mobility user.
The community connect.
Actually, I'm not sure whether they're
Oh,
involved.
so through you, Mr.
please.
Chairman, yeah.
Yeah.
Come February, the half price to total mobility users stops. Whether they're a community services card holder. If they're using the bus, they'll benefit then, but if they're using just total mobility, it stops in February.
Yeah.
Only the community card holder.
On the bus, yes. Yeah.
And if the government kick doesn't change it.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got Councillor Michael Decat followed by Alexa. Michael.
Yes, thanks, Brian. My question is just about the extension requested by Grey Power Otago of the Super Gold Card scheme to 6 p.m. at night. I think it was either 6 or 6:30. I'd have thought that being a central government funded program, that we had no local discretion over that, even if we did agree with Grey Power. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, the government funding covers the period that's mandated. Beyond that, there is a cost to council.
Sorry,
beyond that, sorry, it would be what?
Beyond that 3 p.m. limit, there is a cost to council.
Yeah, I thought
so we tested it with the agency, and if you have a mind to change it, you can, but it comes at your cost.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, thank you. That's good.
Okay, Alexa.
Just a quick one. There's a piece in here about the community services card and how they're not supposed to show that for anything except health. So how is that connected? Do they have to show their community services card? You say you're waiting for legislation, but if this comes in tomorrow, how does somebody get that free fare if they're not supposed to show their card?
So before the government extended the half price fares, the Ministry of Health was working on a change to the regulation with respect to that part of using your community services card. That said, it's one of those funny things that is not enforced because some regions do now have a community service card concession, and the way they validate that with their customers is actually they'll show the card. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
great.
just an odd thing.
No, they're just the lovely integration of some of our things. Thanks. That's what I'm.
Yes, there is. Sorry, there is an additional piece of work going on at the moment to link community services card holders with their B cards. So that will be done on a national basis for web-based.
Thanks.
Cool. Okay, and then followed by Kevin.
I'm just interested about the process with the Grey Power. I mean, it's fine that anyone writes letters in, but we don't normally get reports on them. And this is a stage where their price would have been $1 and they're asking for that to be discounted, covered. We regularly get kickbacks from wanting to get more information, and it just seems, I'm just intrigued that how that process happened, that we did a report on the Grey Power. Because I would love to know more information about buses and how they're being used and numbers and everything. And we've been discouraged.
Writing a letter to Andrew.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm just intrigued because that didn't come to council, did it? We asked for that information.
So the request came to the chairman, and that's why it's found its way here.
I will, next time I will want information, I will go to the chair.
Kevin.
Sorry, can I?
Yes, you can.
Simple as this, I received the request from Joe. I forwarded it on to Doug, and clearly wanted him to give some consideration. Obviously, there needs to be some response, and the response has come through in this report. My plan was to attach it to my council report on the 24th.
Yeah, I think it's not as if we've just had a report separately on Grey Power. It's been integrated into a report that we needed to have to make that commitment in relation to our service. And I think in terms of that context, it's I think that's good and fine. I've got Kevin followed by Hilary, if that's okay.
Going to paragraph 11, just the last sentence says, council will not attempt to introduce extra capacity in response to the excess demand. So this, what we're doing now, increases demand, we're still going to keep it that service level. So maybe some buses, customers are left. What I want to know is that level of service that is the capacity that we're talking about. Is it our sickness COVID level service that we've got now, or is it our contracted service level? Which are quite different, aren't they?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. So it was kind of the catch-all that we put around the first move to the half price fares back several months ago, when government said we were going to make it half price from April to the end of June. It's really to manage that expectation that, you know, irrespective of the operating environment, I should be able to hop on a bus. Well, that's just not the reality. So at some point, and David probably would talk to this than I am, we'll go back, of course, to our full service when we've got those drivers that are available.
Yeah, so my question is, if we do go back to that service, are we saying yes, that we will still have this discount available? So I'm assuming it's at what we've contracted. We've had some hiccups because of sickness, and so we've reduced our service. But in fact, we've got a contracted service that's far higher. So I would assume that price would still.
So it's intended that the half price or the Community Connect will apply irrespective of whether it's the reduced service or the full timetable.
When you say extra capacity, you don't mean of returning to business as usual category.
No, I mean,
extra capacity means on top of that.
Yes,
And
putting extra buses into the service on top of our normal service.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Hillary?
I'd like to move the recommendation, the resolutions recommended.
Sure.
I don't mean to stop
No.
other things happening, but
Okay, so but just while you're doing that, that's page 25. And there are 5 recommendations there. You're moving all 5 here.
I am.
To make the report.
seconded by Kate.
Seconded by Kate. Thank you, Kate. Approves extending the 50% fares. Approves reducing fee card. Approves implementation of the half price with the constraints of the current vessel fleets, and declines to extend the eligibility period for weekday Super Bowl. We've got a mover and a second. Is there any further questions or discussion? Carmen?
Thank you, Chair. On page 27, down the very bottom where we have all the little tiny writing, we have it says there's about 44,000 community services card holders. I just wanted to know, I understand what Grey Power is asking for, and I can see that they wanted compassion, but we have to be realistic, and there is still a good service for them. Do we know how many Grey Power people that are eligible? I can see there's 44,000 for the community services card. I'm just curious, do we have that statistic or not?
Do you mean how many Grey Power members are also community card holders?
Yes.
And
would they
The gold card holders are community card holders.
Or how many B cards are Super Gold?
We do know it's equivalent to $7,500 a month. Do you have the actual number, Julian, or?
No.
Yeah, but the $7,500.
You must have if you have 7.5 a month.
So, I mean, it's not quite answering the question, Mr. Chairman, but in paragraph 27, we give you a snapshot of what happened in June, and where we had about 3,500 Super Gold B card holders making trips, and that, they made 27,500 trips. So that's probably a good metric in terms of what we average in a month.
Okay, cool. Thank you. If there's no further questions, we'll move into debate. We've got a mover and a seconder. Is there any debate, or are people sort of resolved their situation and comfortable?
I'd like to speak to my motion.
Certainly, thank you.
And what I'd like to say is we don't really have any choice about the first bits, because the government has said that they're doing it, and although they cutely said that and meant we're going to encourage them to do it, we have no choice, really. That there would be no realistic and appropriate response other than doing it. As regards the last one, I agree with the advice of our staff. And if we generally want to put more ratepayers' money into this, it's a question of who is the most needy. Do you make it people over 65 out of those hours, which puts more stress on the times that kids are using it in other things? Do you make it more things to into regional buses to, what do you do? So we haven't had a thorough look at what we might do if we thought we had plenty of money and we wanted to add some money into that, as to whether disabled people or which group would be it. So, I mean, the staff have said that better than I'm saying it, but for that reason, I think if we wanted to have a look at how to extend it, we should have a proper look, not just cherry pick one particular lot of people who, as I think Kevin said, $1 a trip isn't the end of the world, and they can do it if you are actually retired, as opposed to the recipient of a super gold card, which are two separate things, then that earlier in the daytime.
Cool. Well said. Any further debate in that matter? Andrew?
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you for the report. I mean, I personally didn't request a report, just so everyone around the table understands. I passed it on to the transport manager to, and I think I said for your consideration. That's all I said. I didn't put a political spin on it or anything like that. But after saying that, thank you for incorporating it in this report. Yes. Thank you for the advice. I think it's fair to say that we need to be mindful how we treat the various requests that we have across the board when it comes to passenger transport, and there is a lot going on, quite a fluid space nationally, a challenging space locally. So yeah, I absolutely accept that the bigger picture needs to be considered, and I think we've had a number of requests over time about extending services to various communities, etc., and how we actually manage at targeted rate in a fair, justified system from a rating perspective. So there are a lot of strands in this, and absolutely accept that that needs to be a fuller discussion across the board, how we fund passenger transport across the city and across obviously Queenstown as well, where we provide services. So thank you for the point.
Cool. Any further debate? If not, we've got a mover and a seconder in regard to these 5 items. I'll put the motion. Those for?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, so this basically ends the public part.
I'm happy to move girls on.
On the basis of sensitivity. Thank you. Yeah, I put that motion. Those for? Aye. Against? Carried.
Who seconded that? Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
And I think Kevin seconded it.
My apologies.
Thank you.